Power rarely announces itself when it feels threatened. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rage, it calculates. Behind closed doors, away from crowds and cameras, the world's leaders gather, not to listen, but to decide whether the voice they've heard still allows room for them. This is not a meeting of faith, nor of diplomacy. It is a reckoning between relevance and surrender. What stands before them is not an enemy with an army, but an idea that cannot be negotiated with. This is Chapter 6 of And Man Was a Vengeful Creation, The Powder Keg. The visitor leaned back in his chair, utterly at ease, a half-eaten chicken drumstick in one hand and a bemused smile playing at his lips. The room, a hastily prepared suite in one of New York's most luxurious hotels, was draped in gold-trimmed curtains and velvet upholstery, the air thick with expensive cologne, and the weight of unspoken fear. To the men and women seated before him, this setting was familiar, a space where power was negotiated, wielded, fought for. But to him, it was meaningless. "Let me spell this out for you," he said, his voice light, almost casual, yet it carried a weight that settled over the room like an oncoming storm. He gestured with the drumstick as if discussing a trivial inconvenience over dinner. "You've missed the point, not just once, not just recently, but over and over and over again." A heavy silence settled. Political leaders shifted in their seats, their gazes darting from one another. Religious figures clutched their symbols of faith, crosses, prayer beads, holy books, like lifelines. Colin Michaels felt something worse than fear creeping into his bones: irrelevance. This man, if he even was a man, had emerged from fire, had spoken not to one nation, not to one faith, but to all humanity in a voice that carried weight beyond borders and titles. And the world had listened. Power had shifted, not to another politician, not to another government, but to him. Colin had spent a lifetime mastering power, understanding its fragility and its rules, but now he was not a player, he was an obstacle. And Colin wasn't alone in that realization. The visitor let the silence fester before speaking again. "All of this," he gestured broadly, sweeping his free hand outward, "should have been paradise." He placed the chicken bone onto the plate with a quiet clink, and then he leaned forward, his voice dropping lower, forcing the room to lean in. "Do you know what it is to create something?" His gaze flickered towards a bishop gripping his rosary. "To form it with care, with love, and then step back, give it freedom, let it become." No one answered. The visitor exhaled, and in that breath there was something ancient, something weary. "And do you know what it is to return, only to find it ruined?" The Prime Minister of Canada swallowed hard. A bishop murmured something under his breath, a prayer perhaps, but his hands trembled against his beads. The visitor's voice hardened. "You've built towers of gold while children starve in their shadows. You hoard while others beg. You claim righteousness, yet kill in my name." His impossible blue eyes darkened. "I spoke of peace. You twisted my words into war. I spoke of unity. You built walls instead." His gaze locked onto the religious figures. "And you," he murmured, softer now, but no less lethal. "You call yourselves my messengers, my shepherds, but you divide, you condemn, you twist faith into a weapon and wield it against those who need it most." The words were not shouted, but they struck like thunder. A long silence followed, stretching unbearably, pressing down on the gathered leaders. Then the visitor sighed, turning his chair towards the window where the city lights stretched endlessly into the night. "I left for a little while," he said softly. "A blink, a breath to let you grow." His fingers traced a meaningless pattern on the table. Then almost to himself he added, "And this is what you've done with my world." The weight of the question settled over him like a final judgment. Colin's breath came slow, measured, but his heartbeat was a drum in his ears. He looked around the table at the faces of the other world leaders. Some avoided his gaze. Others met it and knew. This couldn't continue. If the world turned to him, what use were they? What power did presidents and kings hold if people listened not to them, but to this? Colin's grip tightened. Across the table, the Premier of China shifted in his seat. His hand moved beneath the table, mirroring Colin's own thoughts. Not a signal, nor a command. Just understanding. This wasn't a decision made by one man. It was an instinct shared by those who had spent their lives at the top. Colin let out a slow breath, feeling the cold weight of steel beneath his jacket. Security had been focused outward. They'd searched for bombs, assassins, radicals lurking in the crowd. But the true threat had always been here. The visitor finally turned back to them, one eyebrow raised. He looked at Colin, then at the others, as if taking one final measure of them. And he knew. His expression did not change. No alarm, no fear, just acceptance. Of course, his eyes seemed to say, this was the path you'd always take. A small, almost imperceptible nod. Permission. That was what chilled Colin the most. Still, he didn't hesitate. His gun was ready in his hand before anyone could react. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. A murmur rippled through the gathered officials. Some recoiled in their seats. Others remained perfectly still, their eyes flicking between Colin and the visitor. But the visitor? He tilted his head. Not alarmed, not fearful, curious, and worse, satisfied. A shiver ran down Colin's spine, but it didn't stop him. His voice was steady, but his fingers trembled against the grip. "I can't let you do this." He swallowed, jaw tightening. "Whatever you are, whoever you are, you're a threat to everything." The gunshot shattered the moment. The visitor's body jerked slightly, then slumped forward in his chair. No divine retribution, no unearthly cry, just a quiet, anticlimactic collapse. Colin placed the pistol on the table with deliberate calm, slid the clip out, laid it beside the weapon. Then he knelt on the carpet, hands behind his head, bracing for the inevitable rush of security. But no one moved. The Premier of China stood next, and without hesitation placed his own pistol on the table, his face unreadable. Then another, and another. Within moments, 7 lay gleaming against the polished surface like a silent confession. The President of the United States leaned forward, murmuring something into a microphone pinned to his lapel, and moments later, Secret Service agents entered the room. They didn't rush, they didn't raise their weapons. Instead, they looked at Colin, just briefly, not with judgment or shock, but with understanding. One agent stepped forward, gathering the weapons from the table with practiced efficiency, as though collecting nothing more than pieces of a puzzle. Without a word, he carried them away, to be disposed of. Others moved to the visitor's chair, lifting his motionless body. A thin trail of blood smeared across the polished floor, a sharp contrast against the room's opulence. As they carried him away, Colin stared at the empty seat. Something felt wrong. The visitor had seen this coming. Not just the bullet, but the choice. And he'd been waiting for it. Colin's mouth went dry. He barely registered his own whisper. This is going to take some explaining. Around the table, the world leaders remained still, their faces etched with relief, guilt, and something darker. They'd killed a god, or something like one. And whatever came next, well, that would change everything. They didn't shoot him out of fear or out of hatred. They shot him because they understood. Power once questioned cannot be reclaimed by words, only by force, only by erasure. And yet, the silence that followed was not a victory. No thunder answered the gunshot, no sky fell, no judgment descended, only the unsettling sense that the choice had been expected and that the act itself was part of the measure. They believe they've killed a god, or something close enough. But the most dangerous moment in any reckoning is not the strike. It's what comes after, when consequences begin to move. Thank you for listening to And Man Was a Vengeful Creation. If you're enjoying the series, please consider liking the episode, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with others who enjoy thoughtful science fiction, theological unease, and quiet cosmic horror. Your support genuinely helps keep these stories alive. The powder keg has been lit, the silence has been broken, and whatever has been watching us has not finished watching.